They left me their bankrupt hotel as a joke. My brother laughed, saying good luck with the mess, but 5 years later I made headlines. The memory of that day still stings like an open wound, though now it's more of a bittersweet reminder than a source of pain. It was late summer when they gathered in the lawyer's office, a cold, sterile room filled with mahogany furniture and stale air. My parents had passed away unexpectedly just weeks before, leaving behind their estate to be divided among my siblings and me. I wasn't expecting much. We'd never been particularly close, especially after I moved away from home at 18 to chase dreams that were too big for our small town. When the lawyer slid the envelope across the table toward me, I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. My older brother, Daniel, smirked, leaning back in his chair as if he already knew what was coming. He always thought he was better than me, smarter, stronger, destined for greatness. And maybe he was right about some things, but not this. Not today. You're going to love this, Daniel said, his voice dripping with mockery. Mom and Dad left you something special. I opened the envelope slowly, almost afraid of what I might find inside. There it was, a deed to a property I vaguely remembered hearing about, the old family hotel. A place no one had cared about for decades. It had once been a thriving business, nestled along the coast where tourists flocked during peak season. But those days were long gone. The building itself stood as a relic of another era, crumbling under years of neglect and bad management. When I looked up from the papers, confusion etched across my face. Daniel erupted into laughter. A failing hotel? Seriously? He sneered, shaking his head. Good luck with that mess, Claire. Maybe you can turn it into a bed and breakfast or something. His words cut deeper than any insult ever could because they weren't entirely wrong. The hotel was a disaster, a financial black hole that had drained every penny my parents tried to pour into it. Everyone else got cash, investments, even the house where we grew up. But me? I got the scraps. The leftovers. The joke. The drive to the hotel felt endless, each mile stretching out longer than the last. Every bump in the road seemed to echo through my mind, amplifying the doubts swirling inside me. What did I know about running a hotel? About fixing broken pipes, replacing rotted wood, or convincing people to stay somewhere that hadn't seen a guest in years? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yet here I was, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, determined to prove them all wrong, even if I didn't quite believe it myself yet. When I finally arrived, the sight nearly broke me. The once grand structure loomed over the cliffside like a ghost of its former self. Paint peeled off the walls in long strips, windows were cracked or boarded up, and weeds sprouted defiantly from the cracks in the driveway. Inside, it was worse. Dust coated every surface, cobwebs hung like curtains, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. Furniture sat covered in yellowed sheets, frozen in time like relics of a forgotten past. This wasn't just a failing hotel, it was a graveyard of hopes and dreams. 4 hours, I wandered through the empty halls, my footsteps echoing against the silence. Each room told a story of happier times, faded photographs of smiling guests pinned to bulletin boards, chipped porcelain dishes stacked neatly in the kitchen, and a grand piano in the lobby whose keys hadn't been touched in years. It was hauntingly beautiful in a way, but also overwhelmingly sad. How could anyone possibly bring this place back to life? That night, I slept, or tried to, in one of the few rooms that still had a working bed. The mattress sagged uncomfortably, and the wind howled outside like a mournful wail. Sleep evaded me, replaced instead by a storm of thoughts. Why had my parents left this burden to me? Did they think I could fix it? Or was it really just a cruel joke, a final reminder of how little faith they had in me? By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones, but so had something else, resolve. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of the lobby, surrounded by blueprints and notes scrawled on scraps of paper, I began to dream. If I couldn't save this hotel, then what was the point of anything? Maybe it wasn't just about proving Daniel wrong anymore. Maybe it was about honoring the legacy of a place that had meant so much to my family, and giving it new life. Rebuilding the hotel became my obsession. Days turned into weeks, then months, each passing moment marked by progress, setbacks, and sheer willpower. At first, it was just me and a handful of local workers who believed in the project enough to lend a hand. We started small, tackling the most urgent repairs, fixing the roof, patching leaks, and restoring electricity to parts of the building. It was grueling work, both physically and emotionally. There were mornings when I woke up aching from head to toe, wondering if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. But there were also moments of triumph. The first time the lights flickered on in the lobby, the day we finished painting the exterior, the sound of laughter echoing through the halls again as volunteers joined in to help. One of the biggest challenges was figuring out how to finance everything. The bank wouldn't give me a loan, not with the hotel's history, and I certainly didn't have the money to cover everything myself. So I got creative. I hosted fundraising events in the partially renovated spaces, inviting locals to tour the property and see the vision I had for its future. I sold handmade crafts and baked goods, turning the hotel's courtyard into a makeshift marketplace. Slowly but surely, donations began to trickle in, and with them came a growing sense of community. People started to care, not just about the hotel, but about me. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, overwhelmed by the enormity of the task ahead. There were arguments with contractors, unexpected expenses, and moments when I questioned whether it was all worth it. One particularly low point came when a major investor pulled out at the last minute, leaving us scrambling to make up the difference. I remember sitting alone in the darkened dining hall, staring at the empty tables and chairs, feeling utterly defeated. That's when an elderly woman named Margaret found me. Margaret had worked at the hotel decades ago, back when it was still thriving. She'd heard about my efforts and decided to pay a visit, bringing with her a box of old photographs and memorabilia. As she flipped through the images, pointing out familiar faces and sharing stories of weddings, anniversaries, and holidays celebrated within these walls, I realized something important. This wasn't just my dream anymore, it was ours. Together, we were rebuilding not just a building, but a piece of history. As the renovations progressed, the hotel began to transform in ways I never imagined. What started as a labor of necessity became a passion project, fueled by creativity and collaboration. I hired talented designers and architects who shared my vision of blending modern luxury with rustic charm. The lobby, once drab and lifeless, was reimagined with soaring ceilings, plush seating areas, and a massive stone fireplace that served as the heart of the space. Guest rooms were updated with sleek furnishings and panoramic ocean views, while the gardens were revitalized with vibrant flowers and winding pathways. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the addition of a community center. Inspired by Margaret's stories, I wanted to create a space where locals could gather, host events, and celebrate milestones together. It quickly became the soul of the hotel, drawing visitors not just for its beauty but for the warmth and connection it offered. Word spread faster than I anticipated. Travel bloggers wrote glowing reviews, photographers captured stunning images of the sunset over the cliffs, and soon reservations began pouring in. Couples booked weddings, families planned vacations, and corporate retreats filled the calendar. For the first time in years, the hotel buzzed with energy and excitement. Still, despite the success, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the journey. Something bigger was waiting just around the corner, something that would test everything I'd built and force me to confront the ghosts of my past. Because while the world saw a glamorous entrepreneur and a thriving business, I knew the truth. The scars ran deep, and healing them would take more than polished floors and fresh paint. And then one fateful evening, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean, a phone call changed everything. The phone call came late, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of amber and violet. I was standing on the balcony outside my office, a space I had claimed as my own sanctuary, when the shrill ring pierced the calm. The name flashing on the screen sent a jolt through me, Daniel. My brother hadn't spoken to me since that day in the lawyer's office, not even a text or an email. His silence had been deafening, a constant reminder of how far apart we had drifted over the years. But now, here he was, reaching out after all this time. I hesitated before answering, my thumb hovering over the green button. Finally, with a deep breath, I swiped to accept the call. Hello. My voice was steady, but inside my heart raced. Claire, Daniel said, his tone clipped yet strangely subdued. We need to talk. His words hung heavy in the air, laced with an urgency that made my stomach churn. What is it, Daniel? If you're calling to congratulate me on making headlines, save your breath. I already know you think it's ridiculous. There was a pause, long enough for me to wonder if he'd hung up. Then finally he spoke again. It's not about the hotel. It's Mom and Dad. My grip tightened around the phone. Just hearing their names brought back a flood of emotions, love, grief, anger, all tangled together like knots I couldn't untangle. What about them? I asked cautiously. They didn't leave you the hotel because they thought it was worthless, Daniel said, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. They left it to you because they believed in you. They always believed in you, Claire. More than anyone else. I froze, staring out at the waves crashing against the rocks below. The wind whipped through my hair, but I barely felt it. That's not what it seemed like, I managed to say, though my voice wavered. You laughed at me, Daniel. You called it a joke. And honestly, I thought you were right. I was wrong, he admitted, his tone laced with regret. I've spent 5 years thinking about what happened, wondering if I pushed you away on purpose. Maybe I did. Maybe I wanted to believe you couldn't handle it, so I wouldn't have to face my own failures. Failures? I echoed, confused. Daniel had always been the golden child, the successful one, the responsible one. What could he possibly mean? He sighed heavily. After Mom and Dad passed, I convinced myself I was doing everything right. I took over their investments, managed the estate, kept things running smoothly. But the truth is, I haven't done anything meaningful with my life. I'm stuck chasing numbers and titles, trying to live up to some impossible standard. Watching you turn that wreck of a hotel into something incredible, it made me realize how much I've missed. How much I gave up. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of his confession settled between us, heavy and raw. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell him he deserved to feel guilty for the way he'd treated me. But another part, the part that still remembered the brother who used to protect me from bullies and teach me how to ride a bike, felt a flicker of sympathy. Why are you telling me this now? I asked quietly. Because I want to make things right, Daniel replied. And because there's something else you need to know. Something Mom and Dad never told you. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the hotel unannounced. He looked different somehow, older, wearier, but also more grounded. Gone was the cocky smirk I remembered. In its place was a quiet vulnerability that caught me off guard. We sat in the newly renovated lounge, surrounded by guests chatting over coffee and pastries, yet completely isolated in our own bubble of tension. What do you mean, something Mom and Dad never told me? I demanded as soon as we were alone. If this is another one of your games. It's not a game, Daniel interrupted, his eyes locking onto mine. This is serious, Claire. Do you remember when the hotel first started struggling? Back when we were kids. I nodded slowly. Of course I remembered. Those years had been marked by arguments behind closed doors, whispered conversations late at night, and a growing sense of unease that permeated the house. Yeah, I remember. They blamed it on bad management and rising costs. That's what they told us, Daniel said grimly. But the real reason was something else entirely. Someone else. My chest tightened. What are you talking about? Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. There was a man, an investor, who approached them years ago. He offered to buy the hotel outright, promising to restore it to its former glory. But there was a catch. He wanted full control, no questions asked. When Mom and Dad refused, he retaliated. He bought up properties nearby, undercutting their rates and driving away customers. He even spread rumors about safety violations and poor service. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The damage was done. A chill ran down my spine. Why didn't they fight back? Why didn't they tell anyone? They tried, Daniel explained. But every lawyer they consulted said the case was weak. Without concrete evidence, it would be their word against his. And besides, they didn't want to drag us into it. They thought keeping quiet was the best way to protect us. So they let him destroy them, I murmured, shaking my head in disbelief. All those years, I thought it was their fault. I thought they failed. They didn't fail, Daniel insisted. They sacrificed. They chose to shield us from the ugliness of it all, even if it meant losing everything. And now. He trailed off, glancing around the room. Now you've brought it back to life. You've proven that their sacrifices weren't in vain. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. If all of this is true, why are you telling me now? After 5 years. Because the man who did this, he's coming back. Daniel's jaw clenched. His name is Victor Langston, and he's planning to expand his empire along the coast. Rumor has it he's already circling your property, looking for a way to take it from you. Claire, if he finds out what you've built here, he won't stop until he owns it, or destroys it. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the walls closing in as panic bubbled up inside me. All this time, I had thought the hardest battles were behind me. I had faced debt, doubt, and despair, emerging stronger on the other side. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't just about saving the hotel anymore. It was about protecting the legacy my parents had fought so hard to preserve, and proving to myself that I was capable of standing up to someone who wielded power like a weapon. What do I do? I whispered, gripping the edge of the table. Daniel reached across and placed a hand over mine. For the first time in years, it felt like he was truly my brother again. We fight, he said firmly. Together. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a fixture at the hotel. At first, the staff eyed him warily, unsure of his intentions. But as he rolled up his sleeves and dove into the work alongside them, fixing leaks, painting walls, and brainstorming marketing strategies, they began to warm to him. Together, we prepared for the storm we knew was coming. Victor Langston wasted no time making his move. A sleek black car pulled into the driveway one afternoon, followed by a team of suited associates armed with clipboards and calculators. Langston himself stepped out last, his sharp features framed by silver-streaked hair and a smug smile that made my skin crawl. He strode into the lobby as if he owned the place, his piercing gaze sweeping over every detail. "Claire Bennett," he said, extending a hand. "I must say, you've done quite the job here. Your parents would be proud." I forced myself to shake his hand, though every instinct screamed at me to pull away. "Mr. Langston, to what do we owe the pleasure?" "Pleasure." He chuckled, the sound cold and humorless. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we? I'm here to offer you a deal, one that will benefit us both immensely." "A deal?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Langston gestured for his team to spread out maps and blueprints across the reception desk. "As you may know, I've acquired several properties along this stretch of coastline. My vision is to create a luxury resort chain, catering to the elite travelers who demand nothing but the finest accommodations. Naturally, your hotel would serve as the crown jewel of the operation. With your permission, of course." "And if I don't give you permission?" I asked coolly. His smile faltered, replaced by a steely glint in his eyes. "Then I'll simply find another way to acquire it. Perhaps through less cooperative means." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I glanced at Daniel, who stood silently beside me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm me. But then I remembered the journey that had brought me here, the blood, sweat, and tears poured into every corner of this building. This wasn't just a hotel, it was a testament to resilience, to love, to hope. And I wasn't about to let anyone take it away. "You'll have to try harder than that," I said, meeting Langston's gaze head-on. "Because this hotel isn't for sale. Not today, not ever." Langston's lips curled into a predatory grin. "We'll see about that, Miss Bennett. We'll see." As he turned to leave, I felt a surge of determination course through me. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Whatever battle lay ahead, I was ready to fight it.